Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to round 3. And welcome to our attempt to imitate Doctor Who and look at the future. We're casting our minds forward to 2032, and with a question that I think the good doctor would not be taking, which is what will caseworking look like? So to start this session off, can I ask Julie, if you'd like to come and just give us an overview?
Can I just introduce the panel first?
Oh, all right then. No. Rob,
Hello,
over to you.
I'm chairing this panel, but I'd like to introduce the panel members and let them self-introduce first, please. Julie?
Good morning, everybody. My name's Julie McCarthy, and I am Director of Volunteer Operations at SAFA, the Armed Forces Charity.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Gaffney. I'm the Chief Executive of the Defence Medical Welfare Service.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Jones. I'm the Director of Welfare and Care for Nautilus International.
And I'm Ali Godfrey. I'm the Director of Business Development and the Deputy Chief Executive of the Fishermen's Mission.
And I'm Rob Bosshart. Most of you have met me already. Thank you very much indeed. I think we'll get things underway. I'm going to ask Julie to give us a bit of an overview of the current scene and where it might be leading.
I will come up there, if you're right. I'm jumping bits of papers.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. The fast forward to 2032, what would high quality caseworking look like? I think we had a chat on Friday about what we'd say about this, and actually I think if you'd asked us even 3 years ago, would caseworking look like it does today, we wouldn't have been able to know. So if we had that crystal ball, you know, what would we have known? And I'm not sure we know, but what we do know is what our hopes and aspirations would be, and also what's impacting us now, which will impact on the future. So if you'll forgive me, there'll be a slight variation on what the title might suggest. I think if we look at what the impact of COVID has been on casework more generally, we've certainly had some positive impacts. I think in terms of the collaboration across the charitable sector, that ramped up massively. You know, we were able to really talk to each other much more about what we were doing, and it focused our minds about what the impact was, not least because we expected a tsunami of support to come forward for us, but the majority of organisations actually saw a drop in casework coming forward, which we still don't have an explanation why. You know, why there was an increase in social isolation and loneliness, there was an increase in people looking for more general support, but actually we didn't see that tsunami. We looked at new ways of doing things. We used technology much more. We went much more online. You know, we actually used, for those of you that know my SAFA caseworkers, getting them all online, you will know that actually if I'd asked them to do that, would have been a challenge. Actually, COVID meant we did that probably in about 3 weeks straight, which was fantastic for what we were doing. And it's one of those things that we've held on to going forward. We've increased the use of online technology across the caseworking sector and actually exploring that much more about how we use it. That also raises the challenge of we have to be really careful not to exclude people because of that digital poverty. Moving online, the number of grants, the one increase in grants that we did see across the sector when we were during COVID was keeping people online. We provided tablets at SAFA for over 500 people to enable schoolwork, you know, homeschool working, home working. We paid broadband bills to keep people online and make sure that they could access universal credit applications. A lot of the benefit applications now are online. How do we make sure people have access to that? If we also look at the wider types of support being sought, we're seeing an ongoing change. You know, it's been forecast for a long time that actually the age profile of those seeking support, particularly within the military charity sector, will change massively around 2025 as our Second World War generation die out. And so as we look at that and our national service generation, we at SAFA have certainly seen now at least 60% of those seeking support are of working age, so actually under the age of 55. The support that they are seeking, I would say, is not necessarily complex, but is complicated. And that also is reflected across the sector. There are a number of different factors. There will be debt, there will be mental health factors, there will be housing, there will be some family issues. And actually the financials that they traditionally come to us with are a really small element of it. If we can fix those, that's an enabler to taking some of the pressure off. But if we don't help with those wider issues, actually that's where we will see the repeat, I don't want to say repeat customers, because but people still coming back because we haven't solved that. And I think for us moving forward, that is our challenge. Not least because NHS pressures have meant that the impact on the charitable sector is increasing. You know, social care, the costs being sought and asked for, access to social care, access to mental health support. And I think as we look now at what's happening within the NHS, that will increase into other areas as well. When we see some of our beneficiaries who are waiting for operations, actually, if they have to wait perhaps 6 months, we talked to somebody the other day, waiting, he thought initially, before COVID, for a couple of months for an operation. He's still waiting. So those adaptations that we wouldn't have expected to have to do, we are now doing because that operation is not in sight. And actually, increasingly, we're having to cover that. And the cost of living crisis. So I've just come from a meeting of our serving community cluster, talking to all of the charities, you know, supporting our serving personnel who you would not immediately think of as being impacted by the cost of living crisis, actually who are being. The travel costs, you know, a lack of ability to control your heating costs if you're living SFA, our dispersed families, the impact on them. So all sorts of things, spousal employment, where we have sometimes only one partner, our serving partner in employment, and actually not the partner or spouse, the impact that has. Living overseas, so much going on that actually looking at that and what can we do and what should we be doing. And what is clear is that moving forward, the only thing that we can predict really on what our caseworking is going to look like is that we must collaborate. We must work together on this because no one can do every one thing themselves. We have to give the smoothest possible journey to beneficiaries. If we make it difficult, they will not come back. If they get that first phone call and the person says, oh yeah, no, it's not me that helped, you need to phone this number, and that number doesn't answer, they won't come back for help. And next time we see them, they'll be in significantly greater need. And actually we need to do more, not necessarily to build up resilience, but to make sure people are confident in asking for help. And I think only by doing that will we make sure that we have a really good, robust caseworking system. In an ideal world, caseworking wouldn't exist in 2032. We'd have got rid of the need for it. That has to be the ideal. We know that will not be the case. So we just need to collaborate. We need to have a smooth journey. We do need to focus on digital, but not at the exclusion of those who can't access it. And we need to make sure that actually, even if there is sort of very clear entry points, we then, even if it's not us, if SAFA can't deal, we know who can, and there's a very good referral point out to those who can, with it not being the beneficiary's focus.
Thanks, Julie. I'm conscious that Julie's tour de force of where we are will have raised a number of questions, certainly with our panel members. I'm going to ask them, are there any specific points you want to pick up on? Can I ask you to start, Ali?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who don't know, the Fisherman's Mission works with active and former fishermen and their families, and we provide practical, financial and well-being services to all fishermen fishing in UK waters. I think obviously a lot of what Julie has just said really resounds with us. We're finding our caseworking to be much more complicated, much more complex, as people have not just a variety of different, more modern issues, you might want to say, but an awful lot of mental health issues. And this is really being compounded for us by the difficulties that the NHS is facing. So whereas perhaps previously one of our clients might have been able to get hold of a GP, that sadly is not the case, may have been able to get hold of their mental health team, that is particularly creating a problem. So, for example, we had very recently a client who phoned a member of our port staff and said, my husband and I are going to kill ourselves in the next half hour. So You ring, the port officer rang an ambulance and they said, well, we're not coming. They rang the police and they said, no, we're not going. So then they tried to ring the safeguarding mental health team, and she was actually on the phone for 3.5 hours before somebody picked up. So that's just showing the sort of issues that we're facing now. We foresee that well into the future to become more complex and more complicated and possibly more common. I think the other aspect that we are beginning to see coming forward for us is that we have a lot of funding partners who are very, very wonderful. Deanne's here and some of our other colleagues are unfortunately not, but are there, they support our clients, they do that very well. But what we're seeing, I think, more and more is that the need for stuff like washing machines, fridges, cookers, those sorts of things that have been the real bread and butter of that grant distribution are becoming less needed. You know, I personally have been trying to get rid of my washing machine for some time now, but it is hanging on, and it's been there for the last 25 years. You know, so that's not what we need. What we see a lot of our port staff doing is providing advocacy, trying to get in touch with mental health team workers, going to doctor's appointments to make sure that somebody's understood, giving them the time and the resource that they need. That's not funded. You know, that's very hard to get that sort of funding because it comes under core costs. But we're going to see that more and more and more as we go forward. And finally, a lot of what we do, some of what we do at the moment is what we sort of call plugging the tech gap. So the fact that you can only contact, you know, your GP or, you know, Southern Water or whatever by going online. If you can't go online and you don't know what computer means, we all know that that's an issue. So that's where we can plug that gap. But what we're finding in the future and what we're expecting to happen in the future is that whereas now we might go and visit people in their homes, that's becoming less and less popular. We are moving into a generation who don't want people coming into their homes. They don't want them looking to see whether they need a new fridge or whatever. They just want somebody to help them sort it out. So we see more of that, more FaceTime, more WhatsApp, and that has a challenge in itself as well because it's trying to keep up with the tech. And I'm sure all of you here have experienced what we've experienced. In the last 5 years, we've gone from it costing probably sort of £30–40 per member of staff for the tech to now hundreds and hundreds of pounds per member of staff because of the tech, the licenses, everything that you need to keep up with that digitally. So that's going to give us a funding problem as well, I think, going forward into the future.
Thanks, Ali. Andrew?
Okay, so the North Welfare Fund is currently seeing over 750 seafarers and their dependents through the independent living, supported living and care home at Marriage Park and the various caseworkers around the country. I think the caseworker service will continue to exist as long as there's a social injustice to the benefit system. Our caseworkers are spending a lot of time obtaining the benefits and pensions that these seafarers and their dependents are entitled to. And I've had some really positive stories recently whereby one caseworker actually went to see a person struggling with a pension. They needed various operations to take place, of which my caseworker assisted them to go through the process. Not only did they help them with the mental health and the operations required, they also received £140,000 worth of funding for their family independence and completely changed their lives around. My caseworker would like me to say today that they make a really positive difference to the seafarers community. They thank all those who support them through their grants applications, which support their work. They do regularly communicate with the seafarers up around the country through flyers, through telephone calls, through interaction at home. Some people do not want interaction at home. Some people are demanding it more and more, especially on Mariners Park. My caseworker sometimes on a day to the phone calls, I need to see you, I need to see you. And all of that, I think, is due to education. I think what I would like to see in the future is that when a resident does come to Mariners Park, they're educated on the digital networks of how to obtain benefits, how to obtain their pensions. You know, maybe given some written instruction and maybe go through their family members as well. So it's there whenever they need it. We talked on Friday about what the future looks like. Maybe it's virtual reality or other virtual networks in terms of, virtual friends, caseworking and those type of things. But, there's a lot of work being done in NHS and local authority about, so it's sort of us rather than the charity leading that is tapping into those resources and seeing how we can all work together. I've heard a lot in the room today about collaborative working. I've recently engaged with the local Chamber of Commerce and undertaken some board reviews about skill mix and data and where the digital skills gaps are, etc. And I think it's important that you work with your local authorities and with your sort of local chambers, because we can't do this on our own. We've got to work together on it. That's all I've got.
Thanks very much indeed.
Defence Medical Welfare Service is a specialist welfare organisation that is embedded within hospitals and within medical pathways within the community, and we have specialist welfare officers that can help seafarers and veterans when they find themselves undergoing clinical treatment. And our team have specialist knowledge in terms of bridging the medical parlance into the more normal language that patients would need, and they would sit and work alongside nurses and doctors. The doctors are focused on getting that person fixed from the clinical point of view, but our team are really helping them with the other life issues that may be a result of or are getting in the way of that person's recovery. So we very much see ourselves as a specialist organisation that can support any other organisations and actors, an element of your service. If your person's going into hospital, let us know, and then we can support them through that piece of the journey. We're very associated with the NHS. We get honorary contracts on the ground, and we can help. In terms of the future, interestingly, the NHS are clearly under huge stress at the moment. In their 5-year plan, the way they look out to the future, they are identifying the third sector as a very important resource for them to start to plug into. There's £1 billion worth of charitable funds that they can use to enhance the service for their patients. That's quite a cultural change within the NHS, so I think we're at the beginning of that, but that's something I think we can work collaboratively with them. All the statutory organisations are really under a lot of pressure, and the charity sector is, sometimes wrongly, taking up that burden, but we have a duty to the beneficiaries to make sure that they get continuity of service. We as an organisation have spent a large proportion for us of money on digitising how we capture data around the beneficiaries so that we can identify what trends, what needs, and we can enhance our service and improve that through time. So I do think that investment in your organisation, not for the sake of it, not just to go digital, I don't think that's right. I think your digital strategy, as we talked about in the breakout session, needs to be an extension and enabler for your overall strategy and which people you want to help and how and in what way, and then you can use the digital platforms to enable yourselves as an organisation to reach more people and be more efficient as you help those people and give them more choice in terms of how they access what you do. So that's very much how we see investment is a very important factor of what we do.
Thanks, Paul. Picking up on just one or two of these themes, I'm going to open it up to the floor because I can see that if we move on too much from what we started with, the questions leaving to the end does make sense. Digital seems to be a theme of the morning so far, and I think that's a very strong theme, but as a means of accessing the ability to ask for welfare support, multiple ways of accessing, I think is something that is going to develop over time, and arguably with the catalyst of COVID has probably moved faster than we would have predicted already. So I see that one. Statutory provision, that's always that interface between statutory provision and what charities provide clearly that issue will never go away, and working that interface clearly is something that's going to be an issue going forward. Perhaps something that I'd like the audience to think about is, what is caseworking? Where does the overlap between caseworking, befriending, assistance with well-being, if I can put it that way? I see that as much more of a continuum than perhaps it was in the past. Caseworking was a particular skill, and there's certain other skills, and I see that being as a much more a broader offering in the future. But I'd like to open the floor for questions so far on what's been said, or any comments. Stuart in the corner.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question relating to what Julie said, I think, towards the beginning about the World War II generation dying off by 2025, and in the context of this particular session around projecting forward to 2032.
Yep.
How do you see digital impacting on caseworking by that point? Will there be far more people amongst the beneficiaries who will be happier, comfortable with doing virtual consultations rather than face-to-face meetings? And if so, what might be missed? What are the threats and the risks in that approach?
No, I think you're right. I think we are seeing that already with our young generation. We introduced in October 2020, we introduced WhatsApp to our Forces Line service, which is confidential support line. Traditionally, very few emails, but phone. Actually, our WhatsApp, so we introduced WhatsApp on there. Those initial contacts, which are generally from those under the age of 30, are now, they've gone up over 200%. Since we started that, and we're getting probably a couple of hundred a month now. I've just written the figures down before I came. So we're absolutely seeing that. I think we will increasingly go digital, and I think that the country generally that we'll be expected to do much, much more, and probably by 2032 it will be the absolute standard. I think what we miss is that personal touch. It's the what you see. Interesting, Ali's saying, and we hear that sometimes about people not wanting us to go into their homes. Actually, but when you go into the homes, you see that actually what they don't need is a fridge. What they need is help with hoarding. What they need is help with something else. You can see that there's something else going on because you're face-to-face with them, and you can build that relationship, which I worry. Our Forces Line team are brilliant at building relationships over the phone, but it's a skill, and I worry that we will miss that personalisation, and it'll be too easy just to give a quick fix and not solve what are the root of the issues if we are too much like that. And I think to some degree during COVID we got in touch with each other a little bit more. I live in a little village in North Somerset, and we've got a community group that runs, which is still going, which we're supporting people within our own community. If we can continue that going, I'll be slightly less concerned. But my worry is that actually as we run sort of back into the normal world, we forget that stuff, and that it's that contact. So actually the other issue that we might see then is that increased social isolation and the loneliness stuff, and people not really relating. So I think there are downsides.
If I could pick up on Julie's point there, I think one of the trends which we're already seeing, we're on that continuum, is a move away from direct problem solved with a cash injection to something much more holistic. A number of us are doing more in that area, and I see that area increasing.
Sorry, just picking up what you said.
Deanne.
Hi, Deanne Thomas, Sailors Children. Just picking up on what you said, how do you think we develop our safeguarding measures if we're going more and more virtual? I mean, obviously we're a children's charity, and we push it all the time. Has anybody physically seen this family? Because you get all sorts of things reported via caseworkers from all organisations, but we're only basing it on what that parent tells us. Yeah. And that's very much dependent on the state of that parent's mental health at that point.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So what developments do you see
it's
in
not a win-win
safeguarding?
scenario, going digital or taking away that. One of my sayings is you can't lie across the kitchen table, because actually, an experienced caseworker or home visitor or whatever sees ground truth reality within that family in a way that some remote consultation probably can't. So is there a downside? Yeah, I think there is. Safeguarding would be a worry. I don't know if Claire, you have any thoughts on that?
Could I just add something into
Yes, sure.
that to say that I completely see where you're coming from, Deanne, and empathy is something that's very hard to get across digitally, isn't it? It's that it is coming to walk alongside someone. But I think the reality is that we're going to have to learn new ways to train ourselves to spot different signs, whereas now they're used to sitting in front of somebody and looking for those base touch points that you can get in that one-to-one, face-to-face. But we're going to have to adapt to picking up those messages in other ways, because I think more and more we're just not going to get that face-to-face approach, because it's not what the next generation will see. They will be used to everything being done digitally, and we will need that training. We've recently made a commitment now we've always put all our staff through the mental health first aider course, but now our port staff, but now we're going to put all of our staff through that, and it's looking for those signals, isn't it? But it's going to become harder, but it's going to become, I think, more of a specialist skill.
Thank you, Claire. Anything to add on that, Claire?
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's important. Digital is important, but it's always going to have to be a hybrid version, because you can't get away from the fact that going into someone's house gives you way more information than just doing it digitally. I mean, we had a case before Christmas, which you picked up with us, Rob, where my caseworker sat there and she said, "Why am I so cold?" And they went, "Well, we didn't like to mention it. We haven't had our boiler broke 5 years ago." Yeah. And it was by Christmas, this was 2 weeks before, by Christmas they had a new boiler and the heating sorted. And you don't get that unless you go in. So yes, young people and the younger generation like using digital, but actually we have got to ensure, and going back to your point, Jan, that part of our process, particularly if anything we pick up digitally means that we have concerns, that we say it is part of the process and that we have to do this. So we've got to get that hybrid right.
Yeah, and I think that's key. I think we can't go to just digital. I think we have to. People are coming to us for help, and I think it's right not to scare them off and say we are coming anyway, but just say, look, we really, what we need to get better is explaining the why we need to come, not we need to come and look you in the eyes. We want to see the whites of your eyes. Actually, yeah. But that's really important.
Okay. Anything else from the floor before we move the discussion on a little bit further? One of the other issues that we are, of course, looking at the next 10 days, 10 weeks, 10 months, as well as the next 10 years, because there is so much uncertainty in the charity space because of the cost of living crisis, etc. And the question of prioritisation comes up. How do we prioritise across the needs of our beneficiary population? I did the maths on ours. Ours is about 500,000, our beneficiary population. How do I ensure that I'm reaching that 500,000 to know those who are in need and for them to know how to get in touch? How do we prioritise? Team, would you like to come in on that?
Well,
Ali?
I think for us, I agree. It's going to be very, very difficult. How do you choose who is the more vulnerable out of the group of people that you work with, where you know they are all vulnerable, otherwise you wouldn't be working with them in the future. So I think that For us, it's going to be identifying, as you say, the priority groups, which we know their risk is going to be more immediate. But I think, we've got to come back to the collaboration, to those agencies and those partners and friends that we work with, so that we're not duplicating our efforts, that we're focusing on those people who are very vulnerable, who are going to need that support, but that we talk to each other about what support we can find, because we've all got those little secret funds where we think, oh, they might give us a bit of money towards that. It's sharing those little pots, those things that we found out where other organisations might help, because I'm sure we all share this huge worry for our clients that life is going to become unbearable in the next few months, because it's very, very difficult indeed already. So let's all talk together, let's share every little tiny little fund that we know is going to help someone.
Thanks, Ali. Yes, Paul first.
I think communication and finding ways to communicate with certain groups is going to be key as well. We've talked about the generational difference. A 20-year-old today will communicate and want to communicate in a very different way to a 60-year-old, 70-year-old. And I think we have to adapt and be flexible to be able to communicate in their terms. It's not only whether it's digital or face-to-face, it's actually the language we use and the way that we frame that language, which I think is very important, because some of the worst groups are the ones that won't communicate with us, because if we don't know there's a problem, we can't help, and those go untreated and unhelped and can build up into big problems. So I think communication is really important, and I think training our teams and getting neurodiversity into our teams and people of a younger age or of a different persuasion is really very important, because we have to be able to put ourselves the other side of the table to understand what that person is looking for in terms of trusting us to share. So I think there's a challenge on us on how we communicate and how we adapt. You look at the profile, we're of an age here, I certainly could say that anyway. We need some young people in, we need diversity, so that we can understand the people that are coming along next.
Yep, thanks. Andrew?
Yeah, in terms of prioritisation, I look at basically expenditure over income. We've got a lot of applications forms now that are coming in for basic food and drink items and help with their energy. I took a call last Friday, somebody living in a car because my caseworker's on leave. So working with another caseworker from Glasgow, they were actually housed that person and got them the benefits that they require. Another emergency yesterday, a patient was discharged from hospital, had nowhere to go. They went to live with the mum's house, had no money for a bed. So again, got the caseworkers back on that. A case coming up here from Liverpool yesterday has now got a bed and the financial resources on the short term whilst we seek accommodation, which could be at Marinus Park if I'm able to turn the property around. So it really is deal with it here and now and not letting it drag on.
Thanks. Any points, Celia?
I'm just curious, as a fairly new girl to the sector, how do the people being supported through casework inform your prioritisation process? I know you've mentioned about, making sure that, you spend your money in the best place. I just wanted to get a sense of how you did that.
I think in terms of us doing the casework, from a SAFA point of view, our premises, we are non-judgmental, so it's not for us to prioritise. We provide the information that funders require, and actually I think that's the trick for us, is that ensuring that my caseworkers aren't going, you don't really deserve it. I've got, Mrs. Bloggs down the street is much more deserving than you are. That should not factor in our thinking at all. We provide very clear cases, and what we have to ensure as we go forward, from the Form A that we fill in, actually is that giving funders enough information? Are you getting the right? So we're looking at, the Section 13 at the moment currently based on the herbs analogy in terms of very short. Actually, should we be looking at something more, more substantive than that? Should we be using an outcomes, the outcome star assessment to complete that in there? Not least because it would allow us to measure our outcome and impact as we go, but provide you with more information. And a report that says this person really needs this, thanks very much, is not cutting it. What do you need, and how do we do that? So that for me. And then that will allow us to start building that picture in terms of a caseworker point of view, from absolutely non-judgmental, and that's down to you to then prioritise. But we need to make sure we're giving you that that information for you to then give us the money.
And I'd say from an assistance provider, we don't say X is more deserving than Y. It's based completely on need, on a case-by-case basis. Just to make sure that everyone understands that. I suppose my prioritisation thing is, if we're within the 10-year time frame, where should we be leaning our resources towards? Are the things that we should be doing better? But in terms of judging between two cases, no, we don't. No judgments at all. Thank you. Interesting that some of the panel picked up here on what I've titled it as staffing. Actually, perhaps better phrased, who will be doing casework in the future? And what sort of person, what sort of training, what sort of background will that idealised caseworker be in the future? Question. I don't know. What does the panel think? Shall I start with you, Julie?
Interesting conversation that we have quite a lot. I think for us, we are one of the few organisations that still has, and I will say now, a majority of casework as volunteers. We've recently put in regional offices, so we have an increasing number of staff who are doing casework. And I know I've spoken to some of you, I know that's going down well. It's allowing us to have a backup. It's allowing us to do things more quickly. Could we provide the case numbers that we do? So last year, I think we did just around 10,000 cases. The average for us in a normal year, pre-COVID, was between 15,000 and 18,000 cases. Even looking at our 10,000, 11,000 cases, we couldn't do that with staff. The costs would be in its millions, and the sector couldn't cover that unless we went completely digital and had people doing an awful lot of self-service online. So I think in the future we will continue to use, I know, our commitment is to continue to use volunteers backed up by staff. We need to better reflect the population that we are supporting. I think that's absolutely clear. For us particularly, remembering that our military beneficiaries don't necessarily reflect society as a whole. So actually we might be a little bit later catching up, but we should be better. Our volunteering needs to fit the volunteering roles people want to do as well. So people want to do short-term volunteering, they want to be in and they want to be out. Actually casework requires a lot of training, a lot of support, a lot of dedication. And our challenge, which we're grappling with at the moment, is how we make those manageable, meaningful and mutually beneficial volunteer roles going forward, so that we can give the coverage that you need. But actually behind that, we also have a staff base that can step in when numbers peak, when we can't do something, when something's particularly complex or complicated. And actually, when we can't do it, we talk to colleagues in other organisations who do have caseworkers and say, can you pick this one up? We don't guard it or just park it. So I think that, again, back to that collaboration thing, but I foresee that we will, continue to use volunteers, because we could not provide the coverage that we currently do without it. Will they be the same volunteers that we've got right now in 10 years' time? Absolutely not. Most of them are 75 anyway, 85. You've got a couple of 95-year-olds. So no, but actually we just need to look at what we're doing and how we're training them.
I think there's a bit of a dilemma here, because I personally am a strong believer in having highly trained and specialist people, especially in complex situations. You're talking about children. We operate in a hospital environment. So I think getting the next level of training and professionalism around welfare is really very important for the future. having said that, what we're also identifying is that people are presenting not with just that issue, but a whole series of life problems, financial problems, etc. And therefore, your welfare team or your caseworkers need to have a holistic overview approach to that individual. So while I'm advocating of specialism, I'm also advocating you need to treat the person holistically. So I think this brings us nicely round to the collaboration element, and we as an organisation entity has to work out how do we get that holistic treatment, but at the same time being able to dive in and provide real in-depth specialist knowledge to help people in certain areas. And I don't think that's one organisation, I think that's multiple organisations. And I think that's the beginning of the evolution that we're starting to see.
Yeah. Andrew?
I feel that in the future that the caseworker may be the sort of the coordinator. You know, the NHS has 200,000 people currently on individual budgets. They're looking to grow that, and it could be the caseworker that interlinks with the NHS to develop a budget for that person for their healthcare. It's then tapping into the physiotherapist that may be required, the admiral nurses, the Citizens Advice Bureau, and they're sort of the link person to make sure that things are happening around that. So I think in the future, I'd like to see that model.
For us, we have definitely gone down the professional route. We've been doing that for a very long time now, so all of our port staff who manage our 5,000 active caseloads are all paid members of staff. What we've found recently, which has been very beneficial, is about 30% of our new staff are under the age of 40. Then there's the middle chunk, again another sort of 30-odd%, and then 30% who are aged sort of 45 to 75. So we've got a good breadth of age ranges, and I think that's important for us. We have invested, as I said earlier, an awful lot in training, and we see that we would continue to do that so that our staff have as many skills as they possibly can. But we do hugely rely on the partnerships we have, you know, coming back again to saying, working with Charles and the Education Fund, with Deanne, we have a family where the children are struggling, then, we're going to hand them over to the experts. And so we don't try to do it all. We know what we can do. We ask all of our clients to contact SAIL if they want help financially, because we need them to get to grips with where they are. So it is about using colleagues who have other professional experience. We do a lot with SAFA, and we mutually help each other. So I think I can only see our workforce becoming more and more. I think we've always been professional, and I don't think you need to be paid to be a professional or not. I think it's just the way that your attitude is. But I think we will be going to be training more and more in depth as the needs become more complex. And the law, to be honest, the things that our guys have to deal with now. That I've been at the Fisherman's Mission for 10 years, and it's hugely different to all the different things you've got to have in the back of your head when you're dealing with a vulnerable person.
Thanks, Ali. To the floor, Claire.
I was just going to pick back up on something Julie said earlier and about the sort of casework model going forward. Because I think when someone goes to a charity for help, it is an enormous step for them. They've spent a lot of time actually sort of even getting to that point. And if the first thing they encounter is being told they have to go somewhere else, then I think that is a problem. And it's one of the reasons I have a team of caseworkers in my office, because we can then pick it up. Now, where the next piece comes in is the collaboration, the partnership. I'm now going to send you here for a specialist person to give you the targeted support, but I've ascertained what I can at this point. That why do you need to come to a charity for help is always the sort of most important question. So I think that's, for me, the future casework is this balance of the first point of contact gets enough to get them help and in the system, so that we can then all work together to give the right support. But if all we do is take a call and say, oh, right, lovely, but what you need to do is go somewhere else, that doesn't work.
I hope you didn't think that's what
No,
I'm saying.
I'm not looking at you for that. No, I'm really not.
No,
I'm just saying to me that's
do.
where the collaboration piece of
Exactly.
casework comes in, because it is everybody working together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, and that's a good vision of the future, but it's also a reflection of the way things are changing now within a number of charities. We've set up a role to take those initial calls so that there's a warm first call, even if we follow up with another one, that you never respond with basically wrong number. And you've got to put down the phone and make that second call, because the research shows us that plenty of people never make the second call, so we've lost that person, lost that opportunity to assist by that first, not negative, but perhaps unhelpful first response. So I think we're already changing in that area, but I think from the panel's perspective, you can see we're looking at a much more hybrid model going forward for caseworking, and perhaps widening the definition of what casework is. Yeah. Thank you.
On the other side of that, I think there's a mutual benefit from the charity's perspective. I'm thinking that we're also benefiting because that person, that individual may have gone to another charity to ask for help, and then they're not wasting time, but they've gone to a different charity to ask for the same help, where they're just saving time going to one charity, and it's also saving money. They might have got money from one charity and then another charity, so it's also beneficial to the charity, I would have thought, that they're getting help from one initial point of contact.
Well, indeed, and I think collaboration being the theme of today, one single point of entry, but almonisation, sharing of data securely,
exactly.
and a composite solution. We in RMBT often work with Claire's team, for example, if there's a family with a child in education where we go for their specialist assistance there, whereas we can do something more physical like assistance with a house adaptation or something. So single point of entry, collaborative approach, and delivering the holistic package to the beneficiary is the ideal, and that's what we're all working towards. So totally reinforce your point. Thank you. Question over here.
Hi,
sorry,
thanks. I'm Jo from the Seafarers Charity.
Hi, Jo.
And just coming off the back of what Celia mentioned in the last question, something that I think sometimes charities forget is involving the people that we're supporting. You know, the lived experience of the people that we each, as charities, support, not only in the maritime sector, but all the charities. I think sometimes if we could include them on trustee boards, or include them as volunteers, or along staff, or WhatsApp groups that meet, I don't know, several times a year, we could all just learn so much from them and make sure that we're providing what they want. And also, I think they get confidence, they talk to their friends and their other people. I just think it's like we're talking about collaboration, but the people with lived experience, I think sometimes in the bigger charity sector, we're not utilising the lived experience of the diverse, underrepresented groups, including how do we reach young people to join our trustee boards and everything else.
A lovely link to this afternoon session, if I might say so. But thank you. Great point. Unless there's any other key points on staffing, the next area I wanted to perhaps just explore was we have been accused in the past of doing sticking plaster solutions. In other words, come to us with a problem, we'll fix it for you, go where you're now happy. That of course, doesn't reflect lived experience, to use your phraseology, and indeed, life is just much more complex. And I've just put the title on my notes, well-being. It's not just about solving a problem, it's actually, can we make our beneficiaries' life more livable, more bearable, more enjoyable, and improve their quality of life rather than just solve their problems. Open question. Panel first. Who would like to start?
Well,
Ali?
we run a well-being, so because we work with active fishermen and former fishermen, we've sort of got the whole age range going on in our client base. So about 4 or 5 years ago, we took the decision that with regard to active fishermen, prevention of their health issues in particular would be a good thing. So that was when we developed with Seafarers Hospital Society the CFIT programme, which sees us take health and wellbeing roadshows to the quayside, so free dentistry, physio, and that's proved to be hugely beneficial, health trainers and all that sort of thing. So that's us trying to future-proof our clients, because fishermen are not known for their healthy living way of life. So there's a whole lot in there about safety and giving up smoking and all that sort of thing. So that we're beginning to see some sort of movement on that. So that's really important to us. I think the other thing from our perspective is that once someone is part of the Fishermen's Mission family, then you're in. And once you've been in touch with us, we will stay in touch with you. We will check on you. We'll see if you ever need anything. You can always come back to us. We'll have get-togethers. So we do try to maintain that aspect of our work with various outings and retired fishermen's groups and widows groups and things like that. What I would say is that loneliness, I personally believe, is endemic in this country and has been for many, many years. And I find it soul-destroying, frankly, that having been for 30-odd years in this sector, that I'm still daily meeting people who will tell you that they've not spoken or touched somebody for weeks and weeks and weeks. How we can resource that, I cannot see how that can be resolved. But I think that with COVID, people have become more socially isolated, and I think the younger generation are very isolated, and so I really fear for that in going forward, especially the much younger people who are used to conducting. They will say they've got 5,000 friends. They haven't got 5,000 friends. They've got 5,000 people on Facebook, but that's what they think a friend is. Whereas in my generation, we think of a friend as someone who you have an emotional, personal and physical contact with. Yeah. But going forward, those young people, they're not going to know what that is maybe. And I think that might prove very difficult in the next 10, 20 years.
Thanks. Julie?
I think that proactivity is absolutely right. We started a transition mentoring service primarily for wounded and injured and sick soldiers some time ago, about 6-7 years ago, which has sort of transformed into, it picks up primarily early and vulnerable service leavers from across the 3 services, and that's actually looking at providing people with the life skills once they've left service. And I think it's to survive, to move forward, and actually by doing that and being that more proactive and providing some of those bits, particularly on leaving service, I think we will do that and not actually hopefully stop people from falling into a situation where we'd pick them up 5-10 years later in more dire need. And I do think as well, it's something that Andrew said earlier on as well about that people picking up that need and needing help. I think it's about giving people the confidence and the support to seek help themselves, but also solve some of their own. I think the danger that we fall into if we try and fix everything ourselves is we create a rod for our own back, and actually people don't learn. So it's how we give people those skills, and it's something that we're looking at particularly in with our caseworkers. All too often people are keen to go in and fix everything. Actually, no, how do you empower somebody to fix it for themselves? Yep. What is it? Why do they feel they can't do something? Is it because we need to advocate for them or teach them how to advocate for themselves? Yeah. What do we need to do? And I think we have to be really careful not, to disempower our clients, our beneficiaries. We cannot do that. We need to be empowering them. And I think that's a challenge for us going forward.
Thanks, Julie. Ian, first one. Coming to you second.
If I could just speak on the wellbeing issue, and speaking as somebody whose charity focuses on this quite a lot. 4 years ago, when I was a brand new chief exec in this area and went in to see one of our major funders, she said to me, it's great that you help tackle loneliness once a month with your drop-ins, but it was a stress on the once a month. And from that point on, we decided to do something about that. I would say that 4 years on, and especially through COVID, and especially because of loneliness and all those kind of things, if somebody asked me, what do you want to drop in veterans outreach support, welfare, well-being or clinical today, I would probably say I'll drop everything other than well-being, because it's a single biggest factor in getting people the help they need, because more often than not, getting them to come along and get engaged in things is what builds a trust that gets them confident enough to ask in the first place. And the transformation in the lives of people that we've seen over these past few years has been absolutely amazing. So I sit here as and my clinical trustees would shoot me if they heard me say this, but if I had to drop everything, but knowing that all these other charities are out there providing other things, it would be everything other than well-being.
Interesting. Thanks, Ian. Lady at the back.
Hello, I'm Tina Barnes from the Seafarers Charity.
Oh, Tina.
For the past few years, we've been looking at how we can fund more preventative solutions, longer-term preventative solutions. So you've referred to, a sticking plaster solution, such as a hardship grant. And, we need to recognise that money is often at the root of many problems, and particularly with this looming cost of living crises. So I just wanted to highlight a piece of work that we've been doing at the Seafarers Charity. And you'll find this leaflet in your pack. And we've actually worked on this, first of all, for the fishing sector, which we call a safety net. And it's a body of resources, tools, information in order to inform and support people to make good financial choices so that people do feel empowered and informed and able to make good choices rather than being ripped off by loan sharks or some of the other dodgy deals and scams that are out there. And we moved on from fishing to do the same with the UK merchant sector in partnership with the Merchant Navy Welfare Board. So the information about those tools and resources are all in your delegate pack, and I hope it's helpful.
Thank you very much. Gentleman at the back, please.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Professor Matt Fossey. I'm on one of the panels this afternoon talking about evidence. But one of the things I thought would be quite interesting to raise now to do with well-being is the fact there is quite a lot of data out there at the moment that we haven't quite looked at or analysed on well-being. So for the last 5 years, we've been working with the Armed Forces Covenant Trust to gather data on well-being of help-seeking individuals and families coming to visit various organisations that have been funded by that particular funder. We've got around about 10,000 lines of data that we'll be looking at over the next 6 months or so. And that should give us more of an idea around some of the social circumstances of these people. So looking at things like relationships, housing, employment, finances, etc. So the sort of social conditions that then lead to the challenges later on. So I'm hoping that over the next year or so we should be able to identify what some of these issues are. We won't be able to solve it, we'll just be able to come up with where some of the major challenges are, hopefully so that you as providers will be able to say, well, actually, we maybe need to focus some of our energies more in these types of areas.
Thanks very much indeed, Professor. And you've left us with a final thought, really, is how could we consider upstream interventions in some of these areas? And sadly, we're out of time before we can even answer that question. I think we've covered a wide range of issues about what the future of caseworking looks like, and I won't attempt to summarise where our discussion has led, but hopefully the notes of the session will capture them better than I could. Can I thank our panel members very much for their contribution today, but also for everybody for contributing who I think this has been a very useful session. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, Dean.
Thank you.
Lunch.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks.